Hey, deep divers. Ready for a deep dive today into something pretty amazing. It's all about default networks.
Default networks.
Yeah.
It's like this hidden control center in our brains.
I know, right? When I first heard about it, it just blew my mind.
It really is fascinating stuff. So much going on under the hood that we're not even aware of.
Exactly. So for those tuning in for the first time on this deep dive, what are default networks?
Well, you know how we always talk about mindfulness and being present, right? Well, this is kind of related, but we're going even deeper. Like neuroscience meets ancient wisdom. We're talking about these networks in our brains that are active, even when we're not focused on anything specific.
Oh, like when you're daydreaming?
Yeah.
Just letting your mind wander.
Exactly. That's your default network, or DMN in action.
DMN. Got it.
Yeah.
So it's like this always-on part of our brains, but what's it actually doing?
Well, that's where it gets really interesting. Neuroscience research suggests that these DMNs actually emerge as this unified whole before we even start making memories or having experiences.
Wait, so you're saying there's a baseline me that exists independently of all my life experiences?
That's what the research suggests. It's like a blueprint, waiting to be shaped and colored by everything you encounter.
Okay, that is mind-blowing. So even if I've developed certain thought patterns or habits over time, I'm not stuck with them.
You got it. That's the exciting part. It's like this incredibly adaptable network that's constantly evolving and changing in response to our experiences.
So there's always hope for change. That's a great message, right?
Right? Absolutely. Now, how this blueprint actually translates into our everyday experience is through something called subjective experience.
Subjective experience.
Okay.
What's that?
It's basically how we perceive and experience the world, which is heavily influenced by our DMN. Now, our source material dives into this really intriguing concept of local versus non-local consciousness.
Local versus non-local.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
So local consciousness is like a spotlight. It's focused on the immediate stimuli, the thoughts, sensations, tasks. It's how we navigate our daily lives, make decisions, react to our environment. Okay, I can see that. Like right now, I'm in my local consciousness. I'm focused on this conversation.
Precisely. Now, non-local consciousness is more like a floodlight.
A floodlight. Okay. How is that different?
It's a state of deeper consciousness, less influenced by external factors. A state where feelings of time and space might even fade, you know, like when you're completely absorbed in an activity.
Oh, yeah. Like when I'm playing music
Yeah.
and I totally lose track of time.
Exactly. That's a glimpse of non-local consciousness. And it's linked to your default network humming along, less bound by the limitations of your immediate concerns.
So are you saying we all have the capacity for these expansive, almost mystical experiences?
We absolutely do. We all experience both local and non-local states. But here's the catch. Modern life, with its constant demands and distractions, tends to keep us stuck in local mode.
Yeah, it's like we're always on go, go, go. Always focused on the next thing.
Right. And we lose touch with that deeper level of awareness, that sense of connection to something larger than ourselves.
So how do we get back to that? How do we tap into that non-local consciousness more often?
That's what we'll be exploring in this deep dive. But first, I think it's important to understand why this even matters. Like, why should we care about our default networks?
Right. If it's active even when we're not focused, why does it matter?
Well, our source material suggests that our default network might actually be the origin point of a deeper level of consciousness.
Whoa, hold on. You're saying it's not just passively humming along, it's actually the source of something.
Exactly. It could be the source of our creativity, our intuition, those aha moments that seem to come out of nowhere.
So all that daydreaming and mind wandering, it's not just random noise.
It might be tapping into something much deeper, a level of consciousness that we're not usually aware of.
Wow, okay. This is already blowing my mind. So why isn't it always blissful? Why don't we feel this all the time if our default network is always running in the background?
Well, think about it this way. Our brains are incredible information processors, but they can get overloaded.
Overloaded?
With what? With all the stress, the worry, the overthinking we do, it creates a kind of mental static, what some researchers call entropy.
Entropy. So it's like our brains are trying to tune into this amazing radio station, but there's too much interference.
That's a great analogy. All that mental clutter makes it harder to connect with the clear signal of our default network.
So all that worrying and overthinking, it's actually pulling us away from our natural state of peace and flow.
Exactly. And that's why simply trying to force ourselves to relax or be positive doesn't always work. We need to address the root cause of that mental static.
Okay, I'm seeing the problem now. But how do we fix it? How do we clear out that mental clutter and tap into the power of our default networks.
That's what we'll be diving into in the next part of our deep dive.
I can't wait. This is getting really good.
So stay tuned, deep divers. We're just getting started. Welcome back, deep divers. So in part 1, we talked about this mental static, this entropy that keeps us from really tapping into the amazing power of our default networks.
Right, and how all that stress and worry and overthinking is like this constant interference.
Exactly. It's like trying to listen to a beautiful song, but there's all this static in the background.
Yeah, a really bad connection. So how do we clear out all that static? How do we tune into the right frequency?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, right? And it's something that humans have been exploring for centuries.
Really, I mean, it feels like such a modern problem. With all the technology and the constant distractions.
Well, technology might amplify it, but the underlying issue is something that's been around for a long time. That feeling of being disconnected from ourselves, from each other, from something bigger.
Yeah, like we're just going through the motions, but not really feeling truly alive.
Exactly. And that's where ancient wisdom comes in. Our source material points to some really practical insights from Eastern philosophies and traditions.
Oh, interesting. Like what?
Well, let's take Taoism, for example. There's this concept of non-doing, which is often misunderstood.
Non-doing, so just sitting around doing nothing.
Not exactly. It's more about letting go of that constant need to control and force things.
Okay, so it's not about being passive.
Yeah.
It's more about surrendering to a natural flow.
You got it. It's about trusting that things will unfold as they should, without us having to micromanage every aspect of our lives.
So it's like a deeper level of trust, like letting go of the reins and allowing ourselves to be guided by something bigger.
Exactly. And that surrender can be incredibly liberating. It frees up so much mental energy.
I could see that. When we're constantly trying to control everything, it's exhausting.
It really is. And it keeps us stuck in that local consciousness that we talked about before, always focused on the immediate problems and anxieties.
So non-doing is about shifting to that non-local consciousness, allowing ourselves to tap into a deeper level of wisdom and intuition.
Exactly. And there are specific techniques that can help us cultivate this sense of surrender and non-doing.
Like what?
Well, meditation is a big one, It's been used for centuries to quiet the mind and connect with a deeper sense of awareness.
Meditation. Ah, yes, the classic go-to. But how does it actually work? I mean, what's happening in our brains when we meditate?
Well, research has shown that meditation can actually alter the structure and function of our brains.
Whoa, really? So it's not just some woo-woo spiritual practice. It actually has a measurable impact.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. So meditation helps to quiet the activity in the amygdala, which is the part of our brain responsible for that fight or flight response.
Oh, wow. So it's like hitting the pause button on our stress response.
Exactly. And at the same time, it increases activity in the prefrontal cortex, which is associated with higher level thinking, planning, self-awareness.
So it's like giving our brains a much-needed break from all that stress and anxiety.
Precisely. And it allows us to tap into a calmer, more balanced state.
Okay. So that's how meditation works.
Right.
But how does it tie back to our default networks?
Well, by quieting the mind and cultivating present moment awareness, meditation allows us to connect more deeply with that non-local consciousness we talked about before.
Right. So it's like we're stepping outside the constant stream of thoughts and emotions.
Yeah.
And tapping into something more expansive.
Exactly. And that's where our default network comes in. It's associated with that sense of interconnectedness, that feeling of being part of something larger than ourselves.
Okay, I'm starting to see the connection. So it's not just about feeling relaxed in the moment. It's about training our brains to shift to a more universal awareness.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And that shift can have a profound impact on our lives. We become less attached to our thoughts and emotions, more compassionate towards ourselves and others, more able to navigate life's challenges with a sense of grace and resilience.
That's beautiful. It sounds like meditation is not just a practice, it's a way of life.
It really is.
Yeah.
And the good news is that we can cultivate that same sense of non-doing and present moment awareness in our everyday activities.
Really? So we don't have to be sitting on a cushion in a silent room to access these benefits?
Not at all. We can bring mindfulness and intention to simple everyday tasks like walking, eating, washing the dishes.
So it's like finding those little moments of Zen throughout our day.
Exactly. And by doing so, we can train ourselves to fully experience the richness and beauty of life, instead of just rushing through it on autopilot.
Okay, I love that. But let's be realistic. Life isn't always peaceful and harmonious. Sometimes things get messy, stressful. We hit those inevitable bumps in the road.
You're absolutely right. Life is full of ups and downs. But that's where the resilience we've been talking about comes in.
So how do we build that resilience?
Yeah.
How do we stabilize our default networks so that we can handle those challenges without getting completely thrown off course?
Well, that's where things get really exciting, because our brains are capable of changing and adapting throughout our lives.
Wait, really? So you're saying our brains aren't fixed?
Yeah.
We can actually rewire them.
Exactly. It's called neuroplasticity.
Neuroplasticity, brain plasticity. So we can literally change the structure of our brains.
Yeah. And it's not just some new age theory. There's tons of scientific research to back it up.
Wow. Okay, so how do we actually do that? How do we rewire our brains for greater peace and well-being?
Well, through specific practices and lifestyle choices, we can strengthen the neural pathways associated with those positive emotions. Self-regulation, compassion.
So it's like we're building new highways in our brains for those positive qualities to flow more easily.
That's a great way to put it. And at the same time, we can weaken those old pathways associated with stress, anxiety, and negative thought patterns.
So it's like we're rerouting traffic away from those negative pathways and creating more positive flow in our brains.
Exactly. And all of this is connected to our default network.
This is blowing my mind. So how do we know if it's working? What are the signs that our default networks are getting stronger and more stable?
That's a great question. And that's exactly what we're going to explore in the final part of our deep dive.
All right, deep divers. Welcome back for part 3 of our deep dive on default networks.
We've covered a lot of ground so far, talking about what these networks are, how they work, how they can get disrupted by stress, and how practices like meditation can help us tap into their power.
Exactly. And now I'm really curious to know, what does it actually feel like when you're connected to your default network?
Okay, so imagine this. You're walking in nature. The sun is shining. You feel a gentle breeze on your skin.
Okay, I'm there.
You're not thinking about your to-do list or what you're going to have for dinner.
My mind is quiet.
You're just present in this moment, feeling a deep sense of peace and connection to yourself, to the world around you.
Yeah, I could feel that.
That's a glimpse of what it can feel like to be in tune with your default network. It's a state of effortless awareness, where you're not trying to control or force anything.
So it's like a state of flow.
Exactly. And as you cultivate this connection with your default network, you might start to notice some really positive changes in your life.
Like what?
Well, for one, you might find that you're less reactive to stress, that you're able to handle challenges with more grace and ease.
So it's like you have this inner strength that you didn't have before.
Right. It's like you've built this solid foundation that can withstand the storms of life.
I like that analogy.
Mm-hmm.
And what about creativity? Does being connected to your default network enhance that?
Absolutely. You know how sometimes ideas just seem to pop into your head out of nowhere?
Yeah, like those aha moments.
Exactly. Well, those moments are often a sign that you're tapping into the power of your default network. It's like you've opened up this channel to a deeper level of creativity and intuition.
So it's like we all have this wellspring of creativity within us.
Yeah.
And we just need to learn how to access it.
Precisely. And as you continue to nurture this connection with your default network, you might also notice a shift in your relationships.
Oh, really?
In what way?
Well, you might find that you're more patient and compassionate with others, more understanding, more forgiving.
Because you're more connected to your own heart.
Exactly. And when you're coming from that place of love and compassion, it naturally radiates outward into your relationships.
Wow. So it's like a ripple effect. It starts with you, and then it spreads out to everyone around you.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of this work. You know, it's not just about improving your own life, it's about creating a more peaceful and harmonious world.
That's a beautiful vision. So how do we know if we're on the right track? What are the signs that our default networks are getting stronger and more stable? Well, one sign is that you start to experience those moments of flow more often, where you lose track of time and you're completely absorbed in whatever you're doing.
Okay. And what else?
You might also notice that you're more present in your daily life, more aware of your thoughts and emotions, but less attached to them.
So it's like you're observing your thoughts and emotions from a distance.
Exactly, and that allows you to respond to them in a more skillful way, instead of just reacting on autopilot.
So it's like we're gaining more control over our inner world.
Exactly. And as you continue to practice those techniques we talked about, like meditation, mindfulness, spending time in nature, you'll continue to strengthen your connection with your default network. And those positive changes will become more and more apparent in your life.
This has been such an incredible deep dive. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us.
It's been my pleasure. And remember, this is just the beginning. The journey of self-discovery is a lifelong adventure.
Exactly. So keep exploring, keep practicing, and keep trusting that you have everything you need within you to live a truly fulfilling and joyful life. This is the Deep Dive signing